Hey, what's going on, F Yeah Podcast? We have an amazing episode today. We are joined by Gracy Kanan. Gracie's just got this amazing story. We are so thankful she joined us today. Can't wait for you guys to hear it, and let's go ahead and dive in. Gracy.
Hi.
What's going on?
That's good. Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Stoked.
Hey, before we get into anything around your story, which I'm so excited to hear more from you about, let's just do some like fun facts, some small stuff.
Yeah.
Are you from Colorado originally? Where are you from originally?
Yeah, one of the few Colorado natives
left. That's
yes,
right.
That is me.
That's awesome. And then what do you do for work?
I work at a garden center, so perennial buyer. Not many people know what perennials, the ones that come back.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, the flowers that come back.
Nice.
So yeah, just working with the plants.
That's awesome.
I love it.
I feel like a lot of people we've had on actually have talked about like being a big plant enthusiast. Like, are you big time plant enthusiast? Do you name your plants?
You see, I don't. I've never gotten on that train is naming my plants.
See, my wife has a ton of plants around our apartment, and she names every one of them. She names her car. Everyone else I've talked to is like they name their plants. So
and maybe that's what I should do so they'd stay alive longer. It's just like I pick these really weird niche plants, and I don't want to name it because who knows?
They might go. What's like the most niche plant that you have?
Oh, it's this weird little coleus. It's like a little fairy garden plant.
Okay.
It's called a coleus. Tiny little electric purple yellow leaves. I killed it like a couple of weeks ago.
Dang.
But I just let it sit on the shelf.
Pour one out for the coleus.
Exactly.
So yeah, coleus fairy plant. You said all that, and I was like, totally.
Yes, plants. It's a plant.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, hey, Gracie, we're so excited that you're here. And if you don't mind, I kind of just want to just jump kind of right into your story. Hear more about you, and we can kind of take it from there. And so I guess the best place to start for your story would be like, just give us a little context and background about what life was like for you growing up. Were you raised in a Christian home? Who was Gracie in those younger years? What was faith like for you? I guess let's just pick up the story right there, and then we'll go from there.
Definitely. I grew up in a Christian home. Did we follow Jesus perfectly? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Early on, I think I was probably middle school, we started to fall out of the practice of going to church.
Sure.
That's kind of when things started to get a little bit rocky with my family. Just some division started. But for me, Jesus was always, like, I did feel a kinship to God early on.
Like that connection was kind of always there?
It was, I just, felt the Holy Spirit calling me at a pretty early age.
Wow.
Which was pretty cool. So.
That's awesome. So kind of from that young age, having an understanding and at least a concept or an awareness of God, a relationship with Him at a young age. Like, as you kind of went through like middle school and high school, was that something that continued to develop, or what kind of transpired after that? For
sure. That was definitely the beginning. I was definitely an angsty teen, asking all the questions and, having to figure things out for myself to a degree.
Sure.
But I did, through a lot of it, felt God. And I definitely went through a phase where I needed to choose it for myself. I think a lot of people that grow up in a Christian home need to kind of have that understanding for themselves, not just, I've been told this, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So just kind of, I was drawn to Buddhism and what that looked like, but...
kind of in that stage where you were figuring out, like, when you say that, are you kind of saying in that stage where you were making your faith your own? Were you kind of asking questions so existentially that you were like, hey, I'm really trying to find out what's true? So you were kind of dipping into some different things and figuring it out? What did that process look like for you? Yeah,
to an extent. Just doing research. I had a class in, I was getting my associates at a community college, and I had a class called World Religion. So in that, just learned a lot about different things. And I read a book. On like Kundalini, and we had a monk come in, and which was super informative for me. To have kind of that full, encompassing, very brief summary of a lot of things.
Sure.
But helped me kind of be like, oh wow, yeah, Jesus is awesome.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Sure. That was going to be my next question for you, was in that, I mean, but before we kind of dig into some other parts of your story with you saying that, I'm curious of in that whole process, what was it potentially about Jesus that made you kind of go, hey, I believe this and I'm sticking with this? Sure. Like, did in some way did God manifest himself towards you where you realized it? Was it more of a internal kind of search that you had where the more questions you asked, you kind of found out, hey, the most solid answers I'm getting that are, those are rooted in Jesus? Like, what did it look like for you in that time period to actually like come to a conclusion where you went, hey, I think I'm going to follow Jesus because I actually feel the most compelled by this?
Right. I mean, I love that it's not all about what I do. It's not about me. And it's not so inward, selfish focus. Yeah. It's about Jesus. It's about outside of yourself. And, you know, in the Bible where it says, you know, my burden is light. My burden is light.
His easy burden is light.
Yeah. Like, I feel that, you know. Yeah. It's not, the pressure's not on you. Sure. You know, there's obedience, but that's an abiding, you know, that's not just because you're doing it out of fear. Yeah. And because you want to get to a certain destination. Like, it just felt like this relationship, this connection that like
something was
really
right
spoke to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I hear you saying in that, it was almost like when you laid every world religion, I think, down and laid them side by side, which I think is the coolest thing about being a Jesus follower is, and I've heard this so many times, it might be cliche to some people, but it's like, hey, religion says you need to do X, Y, and Z to get to God. Where Christianity, Jesus says, hey, I'll do X, Y, and Z to get to you.
Right.
And it almost sounds like to me there was this dichotomy that you were wrestling with, that you looked at it and you said, hey, I see how fundamentally different yet attractive the way of Jesus is than everything else that drew you to it, and then that made you stick, which I think is so cool.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And so that was kind of around college for you, you were saying, where you were kind of really wrestling and kind of solidifying that. So,
definitely. Yeah.
So let's pick up your story. I want to get more into kind of maybe those college years, those young adult years. I know this is a part of your story where some things kind of went awry, but there was so much good that came from it. I mean, what was life like for you? College and getting out of college, like, let's just pick up your story there. Like, what was life like for Gracie there?
For sure. I mean, early adulthood was kind of where I got a lot of my struggle out. Sure. You know, where I did feel like I was treading a lot of water. And that was where I was not living an easy, carefree life. I mean, I was definitely struggling with a lot of wounds and trauma from the past.
Yeah. And how old were you in this season of life you're talking about?
19, 20. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, right after high school. Yeah. For me, I went to community college for 2 years. So, like, college years for me are kind of those you know, right after high school days.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, just kind of treading water, figuring things out. I had just gotten out of a pretty long-term relationship, which was where I found support. You know, at that time, I was kind of telling myself the story that I had to figure it out on my own. I can't ask for help. You know, I just need to do it on my own. Yeah. I just had that in my head. Which just led me to looking for answers in all the wrong places, looking for support in the wrong areas.
So Grace, let's unpack that for a second. Yeah. You were saying, hey, you were looking for answers in all the wrong places. Like, what did that look like for you? Like, what were some of those places you were trying to find something from, and maybe what were some of those answers that you were seeking? Like, what did that look like?
Well, definitely the wrong answers were, I mean, other people, relationships, friendships, guys, drinking. You know, definitely kind of starting to get involved in more of that drinking culture, and just finding, I don't know if I was looking for answers, but I was just looking to numb. I was looking to not feel as much, just because there was a lot internally that I hadn't really processed or hadn't dealt with, you know, and it just kind of was manifesting as a lot of toxicity internally.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's so real. I feel like a lot of times, I don't know if you'd speak to this, I feel like with a lot of those things, and I love that you acknowledged, hey, I realize now, like, there's some wounding I was trying to numb. I think in the moment when we do things like that, whatever outlet there is that may not be a healthy outlet to deal with some of the pain or the wounding we're dealing with, I don't even think we realize we're numbing ourselves in the
Exactly.
moment, right? It just becomes this routine of this is something that helps me feel better or not feel, and so
Yeah.
I get into it.
Yeah, it's almost like instinctual, like that's kind of the confusing thing is like at that time, like I was very aware and mindful of like, coping mechanisms and numbing and like the effects that can have, but yet still, I was hurting.
100%.
I was hurting in, some ways and just some wounds that I hadn't addressed yet.
Yeah.
So.
And so kind of coming from that part, I mean, you're in your stage of your life where obviously now you're kind of getting thrown to the wolves a little bit, which I think so many young adults can relate with, where it's like, hey, you graduate high school, maybe you go to college, maybe you don't. And then all of a sudden there's this pressure you need to figure out who you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so you're kind of in that season where obviously you're drinking, you're turning different things. I mean, what happened from that point? Like, how did you get to the point where you're at now? Like, was there something that changed? I mean, just let's just keep talking about that. Like, what happened from that season?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think God was probably looking at me like I need something to halt her in her tracks, and I definitely got that. After an experience that really was kind of the cherry on top, which I'll choose to just kind of keep that private to me and, the people close to me. But that just really kind of triggered a bit more of a heavy spiral for me.
Sure.
And in that, I ended up getting into some legal trouble. Had some pretty heavy consequences just due to my age, being 20. Resulted in, my life feeling like it got totally turned upside down.
Yeah.
And I remember just like looking at myself, looking in the mirror and being like, who have I become? I am not a person that gets in trouble.
Wow.
It was just a total self-reflection moment of, it's like true authentic Gracie was here and I was over here. Like I wasn't myself anymore. And I felt that.
Yeah.
I had that moment of just, really realizing how far I had come.
Wow.
Which praise God that he did that for me.
Yeah.
And I truly, and even in that moment, I mean, there are times where I can get frustrated by it, but from the beginning I've seen it as, oh God, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure in the moment it didn't feel that way, but now looking back, you realize like
for sure.
how loving,
For sure, and the consequences were heavy. The consequences were hard, and just the shame is definitely what I really had to battle. I mean, I really needed to remind myself that this is not a label, that this does not redefine who I am and who God sees me, and then in that realizing that something's wrong, I just catapulted into something's wrong, I need to do something.
Yeah.
Ended up moving to my mom's place up in Evergreen and just deep dove into self-help books, podcasts, all the things, just trying to get my mind right, which...
Yeah, trying to find that semblance of, hey, I know something's wrong. How do I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? What do I do?
Right,
I found myself really seeking that help. And those things were super helpful. I mean, learned lots of awesome tools.
Yeah.
Learned a lot of great things about myself. But what I came to find is that wasn't like the ultimate healing that I needed.
Yeah.
It did a lot for me, but it wasn't everything.
Wasn't that thing that you knew you needed? It was. It didn't satisfy that. Yeah.
I still was struggling with a lot of anxiety. Still wrestling with that shame. I mean, even today, I still do. But that core change I hadn't felt yet.
Yeah.
So in that I ended up moving to North Carolina. I have a great friend out there who's super involved in the church. She was going to seminary.
Yeah.
Just great community was definitely what I needed.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where I began to feel a bit of a shift.
That's amazing. There are so many elements there. I love what you said. A few things that you said that I want to circle back to. One is, I think having the awareness that sometimes when God allows us to hit rock bottom, it's really painful. And in the moment, it's like, why would you do this? What is going on? But now I love how in hindsight you can look back and you realize, man, that was such a loving place. And I, in so many ways, relate with that. I think so many people can relate with that too, either who are looking back or are going through it right now, which is rock bottom can be one of the most gracious places that God has ever given us. Because it gives us a place to stop falling and to look up and say, okay, I'm going to start going a different direction.
Exactly.
And I think that's so amazing. And another thing that you kind of mentioned too that I love that you mentioned is, and I so appreciate your vulnerability in this, is like the shame side of that. Right? I mean, I think so many people, I think that's one of the number one things that young adults deal with and people in general deal with is shame from the past. And how you're saying, hey, because what I love that you're saying is there's been healing in that, but it's not like it still doesn't rear his head up, right? And I think that's something that so many people need to hear is that when you start following Jesus, like, yes, from a standpoint of how God sees you and how you can see yourself, your shame is gone. It doesn't mean there's not going to be moments where that shame creeps back up and doesn't try to come bite you again or start fighting with you again. Exactly. And I love your honesty and your vulnerability of just saying, hey, there's been progress and healing in that, but that hasn't completely gone away. Sure. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And so there's I know there's so much more to your story. So let's pick that back up. Like you're in North Carolina, you're around community, you're around other Jesus followers. From that point, and when you moved to North Carolina, like, what started happening in your life? Like you mentioned how you were searching for this ultimate sense of healing and redemption, and you didn't find it in all those different practices. And like you said, all self-help books, all that stuff, it was good for you, but it didn't satisfy this ultimate craving that you had. So you're in North Carolina. It sounds like you're really starting to delve into your faith. I mean, what happened from that point on?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, early on, I was really an observer. You know, I had humbled myself of feeling like, okay, I don't know much here. You know, I'm going to observe these awesome people, you know, super awesome community, and just listening to their conversations, their relationship with Jesus, and just like really feeling like that, you know, was a calling to my heart. And, you know, in that ended up getting baptized. I still remember. I listened to it every once in a while. It was the song that was playing, and it's pretty much the line in it that I love is "Let every breath be praise." Wow. And that's just like is what I wanted for my life moving forward. Is every breath, every word, everything of my being be praised to you, God.
I got goosebumps, but that's awesome.
Cool. I love that. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just, I'm done trying to figure this out on my own. It's not working for me, you know, and so that was kind of my moment of surrender. And did everything instantly change? No. Yeah. But that began this really awesome trajectory of journey, I felt a lot of my anxiety go away. Does God fix that? For me, yes. Like, I definitely deal with anxiety still. Yeah. But not to the extent I used to. Wow. And just a feeling of groundedness that the Holy Spirit brings that I didn't have before. You know, a feeling of if I don't have family and friend support, if I am on my own on an island, like, I am okay. Wow. You know, I felt like I could truly feel that. Wow. And that was Jesus. That was, you know, the Holy Spirit in me. So.
That is so huge. I mean, man, I think that's so powerful. I think you're even mentioning a part of your story that I think is a part of anybody who would say, hey, I have experienced Jesus show up and not completely fix my life or take my problems away, but I've seen Jesus show up and provide healing and restoration. Is this element of kind of throwing your hands up and go, I'm done trying to figure this out on my own. And I'm done trying to be in control, and I'm done trying to figure out and live my life by myself. I'm actually going to step out of the way and let God get in the driver's seat. And I think that's so hard for us to do as human beings because I think we want to prove to ourselves and to others and to God that we got this. And I think that true healing and the thing that Jesus is always asking us to do is to just admit our faults, admit our problems, and say, hey, I need help. And that's where he shows up and does his most miraculous work. And I think you're a walking like testimony of that, which is so cool. And so, Gracie, kind of to like summarize some stuff. I mean, you obviously went through some highs and some lows, some hills and some valleys. you went through a season where, I mean, you smacked on rock bottom, and you woke up and said, hey, I need to figure this out. And through that process of searching, you really found a closer, deeper, intimate connection with Jesus. And he showed up and changed a lot of things for you. And obviously now you're back from North Carolina, you're here in Colorado. I'm curious from that point on, what does that look like for you? I mean, you mentioned this trajectory. I mean, dig into that a little bit. Like, it started this trajectory. What has that journey and that trajectory been like for you?
Definitely. I mean, after being in North Carolina for a while, I just felt a strong urge back home. I mean, Colorado, I'm a huge, you know.
And the rest of the country?
Right?
So let's move back to Colorado.
Seriously, there's a strong pull here, obviously.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, a big part of who I am is hiking and being in nature.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was just a barista. So there was definitely a pull back to Colorado in that sense. But in a stronger sense, just like restoration for my family. And kind of this healing that I had learned, I really wanted to develop and bring here in Colorado and kind of start that for myself. Because in a way, I did feel like that was an awesome thing they had going on, and I really wanted that for myself.
Wow. Talking to them in North Carolina.
That community, all my, awesome friends out there, and just kind of seeing some struggles that my brother was going through, and just wanting to be there. Up until that point, I had really put my family at arm's length, out of self-preservation, just really wanted to distance, but I had come to find that I really loved them and really need them.
Wow. Yeah.
And wanted to kind of rekindle that relationship.
Wow.
Me and my father didn't speak for about a year, and I really wanted to rebuild that, and so did he, and, to say that we have been, it's been a work in progress, but I really see God's hand in that relationship, in my whole family's relationship.
Wow.
So that was kind of a big pull here. And then for me personally, Flatirons has been awesome. Flatirons Young Adults, I've found an awesome small group.
Free shout out.
Whoop, whoop.
Free shout out. Come on.
I promise.
I didn't even tell her to say it to anybody. She said it herself. Yeah.
But yeah, just super awesome small group. And I had tried so many small groups, tried getting connected so many times, and just, whether it was me or what, just had always kept falling short.
Sure.
But just being around authentic people.
Wow.
I had this story in my head that, like, at church with church people, you got to be a certain way, you got to say a certain thing. You can't show up as your imperfect self.
Yeah.
Which I now know is
you can't be
so
authentic,
false.
Gracie.
Exactly. Like, there has to be a show put on.
Yeah.
And I just came to find people that were in a very similar place as me, just awesome community, and that really built my relationship with God in that sense that I hadn't had before.
For sure.
On the sidelines of that, just personally making it an everyday practice. Starting at the beginning of the Bible, going through, reading it for myself. Like, what is this for me? Like, Holy Spirit, speak to me through this.
Wow.
And just making it more of a personal daily thing.
Your own.
So.
Wow, that's amazing. I love an element you mentioned there where there was this healing and restoration in your life, in North Carolina, obviously, where you saw this life and you went, hey, I want a life like that, but I still now see Jesus forming this in me. And then you experience almost this call to come back home. And I think you're not giving yourself credit for this. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. There's so much faith in that. To not only go, hey, am I going to just directionally go back to a place or change where I'm living, but also like the faith that you had to go, I have experienced something, and now I feel like God is calling me to bring what I've experienced back home to my family and to people here in Colorado. Like, I don't want to undermine or gloss over the fact, like, that took such great faith for you to do that, to just come back and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go seek restoration and healing, and I don't have to. I'm going to go build community and bring what I've learned somewhere else, and I don't have to do that. And so I really admire your faith in that, of saying, hey, I'm going to be attentive to the voice of God, listen to the voice of God enough to go back and seek healing. I think so many times we we glorify something like, oh, God has called me to move to a different country to share the gospel and serve people, which is incredible. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if God called me to do that, I'd be like, man, I don't know, that's a lot. But I think one of the things that we don't do often as Christians is we don't go back to our own backyard and seek that healing and seek that restoration. I almost would argue that takes more faith to go back to a place of familiarity, especially a place and people that may have reminded you of some past wounding and struggles, and say, I'm going to face that and I'm going to bring Jesus into that. I think that takes so much faith, and I admire that so much. That's so cool.
I mean, that just goes to show that it was God. It wasn't. I hope that it wasn't me,
Sure.
There were definitely benefits to it, but that was God bringing me here for, a reason that I might not ever know. But yeah, he had a plan. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but we just got to go.
Amen to that. No, I love that, Gracie. Hey, just to kind of summarize, in everything that you shared, walking through your story, I mean, so much of the struggle and the redemption and the process up until this point took place in those young adult years. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious for you, Gracie, if you could share with anybody who's listening, young adults who are listening, if you look back over the course of these past couple of years, these past 10 years of your life, kind of this story that's really been built, what are some things you would say to encourage, or that if you had to tell young adults one thing, you'd go, hey, I really want to say this to them, what are maybe one or two things that you would really want to share with young adults?
I mean, first and foremost, stop trying to do it on your own. Our brains are wired to be in community and to talk and to, engage with people. And even if it's just one person, one trusted person, I think it's super important to bring people in on your struggles and just voice it. I feel like when I sit down with someone and I just tell them, hey, I'm really struggling with this, it loses its power. Satan loses his grip.
Wow.
And it just allows for more strength and accountability, to be in it. So definitely don't keep struggling and treading water on your own. There's so many people out here that, want to help you. So
that is so good, man. Awesome. Gracie, I cannot thank you enough for coming on, sharing your story with us. You're an absolute rock star. Thanks for just blessing us and blessing everyone who's listening with your story. We really appreciate it.
No, I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Awesome.